generic starting point. We got our to repair oligos, so just a single-stranded oligo. It allows us to do homologous recombination, and then piggyback we excise to Cas9, and we have a clean genome that should have only one base pair difference. If we leave out the repair oligo, then we get non-homologous end joining at higher frequency, and in this particular case, we established several clonal cell lines, including one which is a normal control, a one-base solution of FC, and then an 8-base insertion of non-homologous end joining. So what does this look like? So by all the criteria, the cardiolipin problems, the mitochondrial problems, the dysmorphology and the contractile nature, the normal, you can reconstitute from these stem cells a highly ordered cardiac heart on a chip model, where you get this beautiful repeating sarcomere organization, which is not found in the single base G deletion or the non-homologous end joining alleles. And to complete that proves that this is the gene that's involved in the mutation. You can complement with modified messenger RNA, that is to say, introducing messenger RNA recovers most of the wild type function. Now, I kind of glibly said that we've changed one G base pair, and after discussing yesterday and today about all of the off-target effects, you might say, gee, that's pretty naive, what's wrong with this guy? And what happened is, in the period of time since I started my lab, when we used to really worry, but not actually check, or then later do PCR to make sure the mutation we made is the right one, that we'd be checking out 200 base pairs. We now assume that there's nothing of sequencing in the genome to make sure that they change one base pair and not the rest. And so Luna Yang, she did this experiment. She sequenced two of the mutant clones, and then also did deep sequencing on population. So in the two mutant clones, there was zero off-targets, except for one, which I will claim is in a certain sense on-target for reasons we'll be at in a moment. And then if you look at the large population, you see about 5% off-target, which that is to say have three or more mismatches. And so that means that only 1 in 20 clones would be off-target. So it's relatively easy to get clones from cell lines that are 100% on-target and off-target. The exception, and that makes this story that much, I think the two things are interesting here. One is the idea of using clonal cell lines as a way of cleaning up all the off-targets and cleaning up all the mosaicism of the on-target. The second thing that's interesting here is that for technical reasons that aren't that interesting, the software that we wrote to check for off-targets used a standard reference sequence rather than the correct reference sequence, which is my genome. My genome's been known since 2009, so there's really no excuse. But nevertheless, I'm glad we did it this way, because what we found was there was a SNP. So we were aiming for chromosome X, which there's only one of in males, deleting a G. But on chromosome 5, there's a polymorphism that I happen to be heterozygous for, but the human reference in the is not heterozygous for it. And the consequence of that is that even though we were avoiding off by 1 and off by 2 mismatches, we happen to now get this cause and off by 2, and a very significant off-target of almost 37%. Let's just look at that a little more detail here. This is just, since you're all connoisseurs of this off-target since yesterday, this is the guide RNA region we're targeting. This is the PAM sequence, which is unaffected. Here, the three off-target, which is the reference genome, and then this is where 2 are off-target, where I have a SNP, a heterozygous SNP, and you can see that, and you can the normal one is ancestral, and you can learn about it. And then you might ask, well, I said off-target doesn't matter if it's not in a oncogene or a tumor suppressor, so you can check to see where it's pretty far away from any gene, and it's a pretty big stretch. I mean, if you do it long enough, if you do a careful search, you can find almost every gene is involved in cancer some way or another, so you can find this in the literature. But I think it's unlikely that this particular non-homologous end joining off-target would have caused cancer, but you need to find out, you need to figure that out. The software has to be better, and maybe bioassays have to be better. And that was a particularly rare disease, and it seems to be one of the main things we focus on with the CRISPR technology is fixing rare disease. But what about common diseases? I'm particularly excited about fixing common diseases, and I don't think that necessarily that it's that hard. That you might be daunted by these bell curves, where you might have 9,500 SNPs that cause, explain half the variance in height or something like that. But I think that there still are therapies, despite the fact that you can't do 9,500 multiplex Cas9 just yet. There are interesting things that happen out of the tips of the bell curve, which can inform you how to do gene therapy with smaller numbers. So the question is, how do we do this safely? We can look for examples in the natural population. I gave you an example of the myostatin double null, which tells us that myostatin double nulls are viable and healthy. And here, the lesson here is not that this particular environment these people have chosen, smoking and drinking and sugar, is a good environment, but they might have alleles in their system that are desirable. So this is one source of information that can be put into the testing, this causality testing. The question is, how do you do causality testing on something that takes 122 years, which is longer than most graduate PhD. So So one way to do this is with animal models, and I think more important than longevity is a subtle distinction, but this longevity versus aging reversal. Aging reversal, I think, is a better experiment both scientifically and also in terms of therapies. So here's an example. Amy Wagers and other colleagues with whom we work closely did this heterochronic parabiosis where you suture together old and young mice, and you see a pretty significant impact on the older mice at the level of the neurons, the vasculature, and the skeletal and cardiac muscle. And that leads to, this is a resource for many new experiments, but that leads to GDF11 and other things. Then another published study from Sinclair Group and others is on mitochondrial dysfunction, in particular NAD pathway, which can be rescued by the fairly expensive, it should be inexpensive, but the expensive treatment with nicotinamide. It's on the order of $50,000 a day to scale up the humans, which it isn't do. Or you can potentially do this once in a lifetime alteration to any of the proteins in this pathway. We chose TPAM to deal with this age decline, which in mice is from 6 to 22 months, is about a twofold decrease in NAD levels. So you can influence the TPAM, which in turn influences the NAD, using, in this case, CRISPR epigenomics. So in a kind of classic admission of ignorance, we don't just use the computer, we also carpet bomb the entire region with computer predictions. Here's the transcription start site and 4 different sites chosen to be potential guide RNA binding sites, one of which is clearly a lot better than the other. So you have T1 and T3 are almost undetectable. 1, T2 is about a 47-fold expression increase in TPAM, which results in a 10-fold increase in NAD, and we only needed a 2-fold. So this is probably a big enough dynamic range for this particular problem, the way that we've framed it. Whether or not it will reverse aging is another story for another day. But sometimes you want more than 47-fold, and in particular we wanted more than 47-fold for some of our reprogramming of tissues. To get those organoids, we need to get better control over the differentiation process. And so Al Chavez and Jonathan Simon and Sue Mora explored adding to EP64, which is probably industry standard, other domains to bring in other parts of the transcription activation and mediation complex. So these independent types of domains, and they tried many different combinations and pairwise triples, and the order of the C-permanents, V, P, and R, turned out to be optimal, and it also gave us a nice acronym, which is VIPER. And Sue, I think, will be presenting in one of the workshops. But the point is you can get very significant improvement over EP64 up to 20,000-fold for Titan, which shows you because it's one of the largest coding regions. I mean, just the coding region alone is 100 KB, which is a little bit big for the AAV vectors, for those of you who use AAV. And you can do multiple genes at once. There's 4 at once, getting upwards of 400-fold activation. And like I said, one of the motivations for this was the reprogramming of genomics to get new tissues, in particular interested in neural tissues. And here's reprogramming of version 2 showing just EP64 versus all 3 activation domains. And this is, again and again, we see this lovely activity. And where we're going with the epigenomic reprogramming, in addition to curing diseases or improving or reversing aging, is this reprogramming of tissues and organoids. Here you have a well-ordered sample from a native tissue and an organoid, which is on its way to becoming as native-like as possible. And in between, you can compare the transcriptome or other aspects of epigenomics. We developed a new in-situ sequencing method, which I won't tell you about unless you ask, but it's published 2 papers on it so far, that gives you subcellular resolution in a multicellular context, so you don't pluck the cells out, you leave them in situ. And then once you have this comparison between the native and the organoid, then you can use CellNet from the Bailey and Collins group to compare these and suggest the next iteration of taking the organoid more and more like normal. So I just want to quickly end on this topic of animal applications of CRISPR in particular. Zoonotics, that is to say viruses in particular that cross over from pigs to chickens and other animals to humans, and then gene drives as a way of spreading things in the wild. And we're working on humanized pigs as a source of xenotransplantation, but also pigs in an agricultural setting where with the temptation to use antivirals can result in a potential disaster of multi-drug resistant viruses. So one of the things, there are many things that are needed to be humanized, and this has made huge progress on changing the carbohydrates and the histocompatibility and complement clotting. But we've also focused on one of the most challenging things where we're multiplexing CRISPR, and I think many of you are interested in multiplexing CRISPR. The big challenge is getting rid of the endogenous viruses. Using CRISPR, there are about 40 to 50 endogenous active retroviruses in most pigs, as in most other animals. And so Luan Yang and her team have now targeted these with CRISPR, and preliminary results indicate that we can get rid of a huge fraction of them, maybe 90% at once. So this is a rather large level of multiplexing. But that's a very preliminary result. Gene drives, we can end on this. This is, I think, one of our biggest safety issues, or it's a huge challenge. Very much on the negative side. On the positive side, we have possibility of eliminating malaria, which kills 600,000 people a year, and impacts millions more in a way that truly impacts their quality of life and their employment. And on the negative side, if we mess up, we have something that spreads in the wild and impacts one or more species in a way that shouldn't. So this has to be done very carefully. And even the littlest known is leading up to them. So the idea behind a gene drive dates back at least to 2003 as a technological suggestion. And back to the 70s, actually the person that did part of my thesis with, Bernard Dijon, discovered the first meganuclease, which was one of these selfish DNA elements called SCE1. ISCE1, you might recognize that. But anyway, any kind of meganuclease with CRISPR, if it's flanked by the sequences that it targets, then when you make and you get a heterozygote where you have wild type and the gene drive, which has the nuclease encoded, it will cleave the wild type here, and then the only way to really repair this break, or the easiest way, is to homologous recombination with the gene drive version, and then you either don't repair it, in which case you die if it's an essential gene, or you repair it and you get two copies of the gene drive. Either way, all of the offspring have the gene drive. And this, of course, is completely different change now. Over the last decade, there's been relatively little practical applications of this, but CRISPR completely changes that. There's already two papers showing that this works. And we're also concerned from a safety standpoint that people might accidentally do this. You might say, that seems so complicated. How can they accidentally do that? But it's actually already happened. They kind of stumbled into it. But there's all kinds of interesting safety mechanisms that can be used here. So we've laid out how to do reversal drives, immunization drives. You can avoid resistance because if you cleave and there's selection to get a point mutation, so it won't bleed anymore. But if you have multiple guide RNAs, multiple places in an essential gene, then you avoid that development of resistance to the guide RNAs. You can make it so that you get this reversal. And here's one of my favorites: is that you can go into a small population, say an island. You can push through one gene drive, which can recode it can replace the essential gene with a recoded gene. So now the whole population in the island has a recoded one. And that can be done in a way that's called thresholding, so that it only works if you just kind of shock in all of the population with a large number of gene drives. But then you bring in a second gene drive, called drive D, which is not a threshold. It will spread, even if there's like one insect or one organism in this population, will spread exponentially, but will only target the recoded version of the essential gene. And so it's much safer at that point. Both of the drives escape from the island. The first one won't work on the mainland because it's the threshold of the gene drive. The second one will work because even though it's an exponential drive, is only targeted for the recoded one. So you can do some of the ideas behind safety in the wild. And then there's additional things you can do for safety in the laboratory. You can have obviously physical isolation, but even physical isolation is not sufficient for certain organisms. For example, the gain of function of viruses are not considered a good idea even with physical containment. And genetic containment, ecological containment, where you grow Anopheles gambii, not in the middle of the Anopheles belt in Africa, but in Boston where there's no Anopheles in the environment. So physical, genetic, and ecological isolation. This is a genetic isolation where you put the Cas9 not in the guide, not in the drive. The guide is in the drive, but not the Cas9. So you've broken the guide in half in certain sense. So when it goes out into the wild, the wild won't have Cas9, and so it will fade into a non-exponential form immediately. We tested out all these safety mechanisms in yeast, which doesn't fly, which is another safety feature. But we're moving into mosquitoes. But we want to test all these safety mechanisms. And on a broad phylogenetic tree of wild yeast strains, and it works very efficiently. So here they have the red versus white assay, and you can see all these tetrads from yeast, close to 100% gene drive success rather than a normal Mendelian ratio of 50 as you see in this tetrad here. We have two of each. So just going to end on that note, the goal of gene drive is not just malaria. You can use it on invasive species. For example, invasive rodents are causing extinction of a large number of birds and reptiles on over 700 islands. Some of these invasive species have been removed by rodents killing toxic chemicals, but it's very problematic on the bigger islands or the islands that have humans and pets and agricultural species. So this was done as part of the climate change. Kenneth Exfeld, who's a fellow at the Beast. Andy Spitzler is a graduate student, second year graduate student here with Flaminio Petrucci's lab at the Harvard School of Public Health. They have a really great malaria mosquito isolation facility. So I finished a little bit early. Hopefully it's been provocative enough to bear a few questions. Thank you. Yes?
So one question I have, going back to your nominating key molecules in this crisis, what you really work to focus on, in combination with the point of your personal genetic architecture. Do you think, would you support an idea of making two metrics in which not only measuring off-target, potential local off-target effects, but also having metrics for potential for alternatives and taking into account the adversity across the chip that is building out the
So the simple answer is yes, and I'll repeat the question. I think everybody heard it, but just to reframe it, the answer is so simple. The proposal is that we should have a new metric for target, which focuses on contains and suppressors, and it could be either one or the other, depending on whether you're doing a nuclease or an activator or a repressor. So you don't necessarily have to. But the point is, you don't have to necessarily worry about every single base pair. Some base pair are much more important than others as on targets. And then the second part of the proposal is that we really focus on the individual genome. So I fully agree with both of those. Yeah. Yes.
I'm just saying, while you're talking about airflow, and if we didn't make that a mutation on the molecular virus, what is that mutation?
Okay. So the question was about one of my first slides, which multivirus resistance, and this was just to illustrate our dedication to safety more than anything else. But it's probably not as relevant as everybody in this room, other than as another example. This is an E. coli. In principle, the methods could be used in more complicated organisms, but we've changed the genetic code. So the idea is that if the virus comes in, the very few things that the virus have in common, they all have different receptors they bind to, different polymerases and so forth, but they all share a need for this genetic code. If you change it sufficiently, it'll be resistant to all viruses, including viruses you've never characterized before, and completely resistant in such a way they can't be, so the viruses can't evolve to deal with it. That's the theory anyway. In the first strain that we tested, we didn't expect it to be as good as it was, but the two viruses we inspected in detail is already resistant to both of them. At about 1,000-fold level, we expect the next strain will be essentially infinitely resistant. That's the idea. Yeah.
That's pretty nice. I noticed that after your list that you have epigenome engineering. You commented on where?
Epigenome engineering?
Yes.
Well, the illustration I gave for epigenome engineering was the TPAM and the generation of neurons. So we had CRISPR activators. The Viper allows up to 20,000-fold enhancement of transcriptional activity. That's what I meant by epigenome. I know some people consider epigenomics only. Yeah.
Just I read on the CRISPR that people are trying to limit that to like a conjugate DFT, right?
Yes.
DNA nucleation, but still there's no success.
So I didn't mean to imply that we were working on methylation or there are many aspects of epigenomics that one can leverage now, because Cas9 seems to be a kind of a little platform you can stick domains onto. I think my point about epigenomics is many of these things accomplish the same goal. You know, if you repress it one way or another, if you activate it one way or another. But the point is we have an increasing number of tools in the toolbox, and we have this in situ sequencing method for assessing whether the epigenomics is working in detail, not just in broad strokes. Yes, I didn't put the acronym, but just published in Science and Nature Protocols. How many people here have their genome sequenced? One. That's it. It's relative to two. This is limited to the pipeline. How much work is it? We're doing the Personal Genome Project. It's free. Okay. Well, thank you very much.
So we had a great kickoff with Eric Green giving us this pretty general overview of both from genomics, digital health and medicine, and now we'll follow that up, I think, with an equally impactful talk from George Church. And since most of us know well George's work, I thought great to have somebody more personally connected give the intro for George. So Jason Poe will give you much thanks. I should say there are two prime seats for people in the back. This would be a good time to come up and grab a couple seats if you want them. I'm Jason Poe, and I'm the director of the Sharing Lab here at the Icahn Institute. And thanks to Eric and Pamela and Judy and Orly putting it together. I've known George and worked with George for the past 10 years. And when I was asked to do a 1-minute introduction of George, I felt like it was a bit like being asked to write a summary of Wikipedia in 140 characters. So it was a big challenge. And George really has had many professional faces. And his list of achievements so far in his career are extraordinary. And it's really no coincidence that he was awarded several years ago the Power Prize, which is the longest running technology prize in the United States. And it's an award that's shared by Thomas Edison, Albert Einstein, Marie Curie, and many other legends in technology, science, and medicine. For people who are really familiar with genomics, you may know George the best from the perspective of the Personal Genome Project he founded 10 years ago in 2005. And there are now sites in 4 countries, going on a dozen more. And this effort has been pioneering for the field of personal genomics in regards to reciprocity, data sharing, the concept of open consent, and pioneering participatory research where participants are co-investigators in a research study. And this effort has really made a lasting impression on many people around the world, not least of which on the thousands of participants who are signed up for one of these many research sites in the world. Let's see here. So what you may not know is that George also has made incredible contributions in reading genomes. His contributions in reading genomes is really just a small part of a larger set of projects, which includes writing genomes in the field of synthetic biology. And so many of the extraordinary projects which I encourage you to look up and read his book, Regenesis, MAGE, Gene Drives, Mirror World through E. coli, Polynese, and he was formative effort in getting the brain initiative going, DNA, origami, nanorobots, and many, many more. And his book, also something very special about it, is that he encoded all 350 pages of his book in DNA. And so it's one of the single most printed book in the world. There are over 70 billion copies, which of course fit on the head of a pen. It has DNA, and he has really his work editing. He's made several contributions to CRISPR technology, which many people are excited about, of course. And in his spare time, he's also bringing back cold-tolerant elephants. You might know them as lieutenants. And so his contributions really as one of the greatest living technologists of our era. He's also a very successful entrepreneur. And so you might see his technologies and products in many of the companies such as these. And his conflict of interest slide is legendary. So please help me with a warm welcome of George Church. There's a conflict of interest slide, reputational slide, and I will say nice things about the organizations that helped us get our technologies from the hydropower into the marketplace for immediate use. I could frame this, sometimes I frame this talk as a collection of technologies that might be useful to people in the room. This one will be framed sort of as an argument of why big data is easier than little data. And it's not a topic that I talk about all the time, but why not? And so you might say, yeah, it's better than little data now. For a while, the morning sure was better. But is it really easier? Why would we say it's easier? This is one of your typical data warehouses I visited in England, and they have 250 kilowatts per computer unit, and all those red pipes are so that you can douse the whole thing with heptafluorocarbamide in case there's a problem. You don't really want to be in there when all the heptafluorocarbamide goes down to put out the fire. And you have to wear these ear protection because of the noise that it has. So anyway, this is what big data is associated with in mind. I'm going to say that it is easier, and I'm going to give a few anecdotes that are connected, starting with a very early one where we didn't really know how we would go about understanding RNA, and when it all ends with how we look at DNA, RNA, and protein in a similar sort of way. What is the advantage of going to 3 dimensions and getting really good data sets about cells, tissues, organs, human beings, and environment? And then these are the topics along the way. So just keep seeing the slide and you'll know where you are. So this is me in 1973. This is quite growing a beard yet. Teenager, doing what most teenagers do, solving crystal structures of nucleic acids. And here is the status, sort of in the early 70s, of what people thought transfer RNA would look like. And needless to say, they were all wrong. They were based on chemical reactivity and things like that. And what we did instead is we collected 8,000 plus diffraction data points to cover 652 hydrogen atoms. And it turned out to be much richer, much more informative, and much more the correct structure, and it's still in use to this day. There's a similar kind of anxiety that went around from the beginning of the Genome Project, which will be the topic here. How would we go about comparing genomes, and what were the shortcuts we could use to bring the price down from what we worried would be, $3 to $30 billion down to something reasonable. And this was the project kind of started in a little meeting I was at in 1984 with the Department of Energy, and then started for real in 1990 with the NIH. And in between was this National Academy of Sciences study where they invited a bunch of people to give their opinion. And I was in the room when one of the pure scientists who made was calculated this calculation where you compare the human genome to itself with some large number of genomes to themselves. So 2 billion squared would be 10 to the 19th operations of some sort you would need to compare. And so this would be on the order of 100,000 a few years, and hence 99% of the genome budgets to go to that and his pure science colleagues. So this is not at all a self-serving, and I can actually believe this, and it ignored the fact that there were already in the pure science literature linear algorithms for doing these searches, and some are even better than linear, and yes, we got Blast and Google and lots of other things that do things like this all the time for much less. And so we ended up sitting at a fraction of the genome budget on sequence on cellular computing. nevertheless, it was a fairly big project at the time, and it was, these are the sequence shortcuts that were suggested over and over again. I'm giving this kind of a warm-up analysis of why smart people are always really smart things. And so one of the things is that every round is a task or phase where your goal was to get 1x coverage. And for those who know the target here, that means having everything go exactly once, so you wouldn't basically sequence 2 or 3 times. So this is too painful to imagine sequencing the genome more than once. And so now, for those of you that are smiling, it's pretty routine to do 30 or 50x coverage of human genomes, and some of bacterial forms do 1,000x coverage just in case. And it's just laughable. And then they would focus on the protein coding. It was almost, the project was almost canceled because when people realized that 99% of the genome couldn't code for proteins, and then they thought of various clever ways of doing this. The least clever part of it is we still have actually thing called protein, they pretty much sequenced 100,000 human genomes. We're still, if we were to do it this way, we'd still be doing it. And then focusing on single nucleotide polymorphism, something that had advantages of this thing. So this is what I think people didn't really fully anticipate, and I think they can be excused for not anticipating it. So we were on a nice Moore's law curve, which is actually breathtaking, computing world of the green Moore's law, and also the sequencing going back to the dawn of sequencing in the 60s. We were on this nice curve, and the computer science community, the computer engineering community, they much more disciplined and they stuck with this law, but we didn't. We kind of fell off the cliff. We'll skip over today. But the point is that keep going. And I don't really think it's plateauing. I think it's still going faster than Moore's law. And you'll see some of the reasons that we're going to this three-dimensional and subcellular resolution. And there's a lot of information there that we get. And since it's taking 6 decades, it's really predicted from the very aggressive exponential Moore's law for the past 6 years. It wasn't just about cost. You wouldn't want to have a really cheap genome, which is 75% error rate. If you can get it for free, actually. But we were debating at the beginning of the project whether 10 to the minus 2 or 10 to the minus 3 was the right number for the error rate, which I felt at the time, and I still feel would have been an appalling way to achieve the goal, and probably would have taken us longer if we had set that as the goal. Anyway, now we're the publications that had 10 to the minus 7, the one that we co-authored with CGI in 2012, and the unpublished data they're getting for the well-behaved parts of the genome is around 1 billion. So it's still not so well-behaved parts of the genome, but even these are affected this second plot, which is a haplotype based on the alterations, the variations that occur in the chromosome. And these are sort of the
partially double-stranded DNA being read, and DNA tags on to the polyphosphate on the end of each triphosphate. But anyway, it dangles in like a fishing line, and then gets detected as it goes by. And this has the advantage that the rate of this can essentially be very similar to the rate of the more complex machines that weigh about half a ton, like PacBio or the Illumina, but it can fit on this little chip. Most of the action is happening in this little chip, which is now 128,000 pores in the case of Xenia, and will scale up to 10 million very soon. And then this is a little picture from our 1995 patent, which looks very similar to how we're actually doing it today. So one of the things, so that's just very speculative, still, they are now, both of them are available in labs being beta tested and producing data. The Oxford pores produce data on the order for E. coli and yeast, and the Xenia is about a few years behind them, but, really just a few months behind them in terms of producing data. Now you can say, well, if we keep having this super steep exponential growth in capability that's beating Moore's law, then surely we're going to have problems.